Hello everyone. This is a follow-up video to the one I did earlier on the game between Arkady Neidich with the white pieces and Fabiano Caruana with the black pieces. And that was from the 17th European Team Championships. And that game was a Ruy Lopez exchange variation whereby Caruana was able to equalize, but he made a blunder and lost the game as a result. I had promised to show you another game in the same line where white plays a bit more precisely here. Now, this game is from 2006 and is from the 37th Chess Olympiad. And with the white pieces, we have Teimour Radjabov, who was rated 2717 at the time, and Alexey Shirov, who was rated 2699 with the black pieces. And as you can see, the position on the board is a classic Ruy Lopez beginning. A6 was played. Nowadays, of course, we see a lot of this move signifying the Berlin defense, as opposed to the old Morphy move A6. After bishop takes C6, D takes C6, the pawn is not really for grabs, as it is well known, but I know there's some always new people watching. Basically, if knight takes E5, queen takes D4, attacking the knight and pawn at the same time. There's no way to hold on to both units, so therefore, after say knight F3, and simply queen takes E4 check, and black probably has a slight advantage, definitely more than equalized due to the possession of those two bishops. But we'll go ahead and say it's basically a dead draw. Okay, so nobody goes into that line at all. And that's the idea behind A6, is that the black player can get away with challenging the bishop. And main practice for years has always been to bring the bishop back to A4, and then you get into your mainline theory of the Ruy Lopez, and there's tons and tons of theory on that. But for our game, the exchange variation was played. Bishop takes C6, and of course the idea is not really to, win this E pawn. As we've shown, it cannot be really done. But what happens is in exchange for the bishop pair, white damages the pawn structure on the king side, on the queen side of black. And he has a slight lead in development. In compensation, black holds the bishop pair. And this creates that dynamic equality, because that light square bishop has no opponent. And sometimes black is able to dominate on the light squares with that bishop. So after D takes C6, castle is played. And one of the major themes in this opening for white is to try to get to a king and pawn endgame, whereby his superior pawn structure will be able to win against black's damaged pawn structure. Max Erva, former world champion, who actually defeated Alekhine in 1935, he did an endgame study a long time ago. Maybe I'll show it one of these times. Basically showing the endgame from the exchange variation after. Let's look at some of the main lines. So, for instance, castle. Notice that E pawn is really legitimately attacked now. So let's say after F6, D4 takes C5 here. Erva had shown not from this position, but just the king and pawn ending from this position, and that basically white has a one game from this position. Again, not with all the minor pieces and the rooks, but from the king and pawn perspective. So basically, if he had a computer back in the days, he would have taken all of the heavy pieces off and all the minor pieces off and kept the pawns and the kings and played from there. And he showed that white uh, will win this ending due to his 4-3 majority of pawns on the king side, and the fact that this pawn structure is crippled over here, that eventually white will have a free hand and will be able to create a passed pawn on the king side. And if you notice in the Berlin defense, the main line, the Berlin Wall, you see the same idea where white is trying to use the 4-3 pawn majority on the king side to create a passed pawn in the end. What makes it so complicated is that in reality, in practice, that all of the pieces, even though the queens are exchanged, that the minor pieces and the rooks are still on the board. And like for instance, in this position, we see black has a bishop here. So there's all type of factors, mitigating factors that make it very difficult for white just to go and win the game. But I bring that up to say that ideally, white's strategy is to basically try to trade off everything and win the king and pawn endgame. And of course, in practice, this is not always realizable. And we see that this variation, Ruy Lopez exchange, is not played too often because of its tendency to be drawish. There's many defenses for black, but it is a decent surprise weapon and is popular at amateur levels due to its relative simplicity. For instance, it's easy to just take on c6 and then simply the castle. It's very hard to go wrong with that position there. Okay, so back to the game. So after castles, let me say once again, this pawn is threatened. So black has to defend it somehow. There's several ways of defense. That's playable. Bishop d6, queen f6, queen d6, even the move knight e7 is possible. There's many different defenses here. We're not going to go into all of them, but just know that there are several defenses. The one played in the game is another one, and that's bishop g4. Now, this is can become a gambit after h3, and I showed this in the last video, but in case you didn't see that one, after h3, g4, bishop g6, knight takes e5. Now, you can see white's kingside pawn structure is extremely compromised, and after queen h4, queen f3, there are several games where castle queenside. There's several games where black proves that he has full compensation for that pawn deficit in attacking the king side. Attack almost plays itself here. So you hardly ever see this too much, but it's not necessarily because of h5, so to speak, after h3. It's simply because this line has superseded the one I just showed you. So instead of going to h5 and retreating the bishop, black plays h5 with the idea of attacking viciously on the king side if the bishop is captured. Okay, so Radjabov played d3. And the idea is to be able to play knight bd2 after the coming move queen f6, which is an attempt to double up white's kingside pawns. Just real quick again, if h takes g4, because everybody wants to know what happens if you take it, H takes G4. Put the knight where you will. If we go here with the knight, then queen H4 is lights out. How you gonna stop the mate? Knight here, same scenario. Mate is coming. That leaves you in a position where you pretty much have to just give back the piece. So for instance, let's see, D3, for example. And now white is forced to give up a pawn. And this is not what white intended when he played the opening. Therefore, so after H5, D3, Queen F6, again threatening to compromise white's pawn structure on the king side. Knight BD2, main move. Knight E7. The idea is to come here, Knight G6, and to F4, which is the main theme in king's pawn openings. And for white, it would be to get a knight to F5. Rook E1. Now, if you watched the previous video in the Nidich Caruana game, Nidich had played this move, Knight C4, putting in another attack here, and basically allowing black to equalize quickly after bishop takes F3, and then exchange on F3. And although white went on to win this game, it was due to Caruana making basically a one-move blunder. Although white did build up some pressure in the position, the ultimate folly was the one-move blunder, Knight F8, which really allowed Knight to crash through and win that game. So this is playable, but not, it's not giving white any type of advantage. Black would probably be happy to play this position. So the improvement in the correct move in this position, Radjabov plays Rook E1. And it looks like, if you're seeing it for the first time, it looks kind of funny. And again, notice because I let several moves go past without even addressing the bishop being captured. Because it's the same concepts. If this pawn captures G4, the H file is ripped open. So just know that for the several moves, black knows his bishop cannot really be successfully captured. 97, same thing here. Now, keep in mind, however, though, white does want to capture the bishop. I mean, a piece is a piece. So white is also preparing and trying to set up a scenario whereby he can safely capture that bishop. And this leads me into explaining the reason for Rook E1. What Rook E1 does is it makes space at F1 so that the bishop on G4 can be captured, and then a knight can come here for the protection of the H2 square. Now Shirov makes what I believe is a mistake. He could have kept this bishop here, but he saw Rook E1 and probably felt this bishop was no longer safe. But if he went along with this plan, for instance, Knight G6, then the correct move for white here is D4. And D4 is a very important move. It's a subtle move. And one of the ideas, besides attacking this pawn, of course, one of the main ideas with D4 is it keeps the bishop from coming to C5 in critical lines, putting pressure on this diagonal. Very, very important move. It also has ideas if capture, this E5 coming, and we see the rook opposed to the king there. Let me just give you the idea to show you that the bishop on G4 is still safe here. So if Shirov continued with knight g6, which is one of the main continuations, let me show you. So h takes g4, h takes g4, and again, let's say he tries to, basically go up a piece. He moves his knight to h2, bishop c5. Now you see the point I was making with that move d4. Now the bishop is here, putting pressure on the diagonal, along with the queen. So now we see an immediate threat here. It has to be dealt with, just for idea's sake. And right here, just note that black is already better, if not winning in the position. I mean, he's practically forced just to put a piece there, just to save the position. But let's keep going with the idea. So rook e2, right, guarding the second rank, right? Surprise, rook takes h2 check. King takes h2, and now this move is killer. g3, check, of course. Notice the main problem here is this open h file. We have this bishop guarding this, and if f takes g3, then simply castle. Notice the king cannot come here because there's a bishop on c5, and this rook is coming. This is mate will be coming shortly. That's just to give you the main idea, so you understand that Shirov could have left the bishop for one more move. Now, of course, instead of a bad move like knight h2, g3 is possible here. Again, he just has to give up the piece. g3 is possible here, and then, of course, black could just capture, but he can wait another move and play bishop c5 again with these the attack on his diagonal. Do a lot of tactics in here. So after knight g6, that's not really doable. But d4. Now you understand, since I showed you those lines, with the bishop coming to c5, now you can see the power of that move. Now, bishop d6 is possible, but knight f4, let's keep continuing with the idea. Notice the bishop really can't be captured. D takes e5, giving up a pawn here. Queen g6, and this is crazy. Just too much activity around the white king. Knight h4. Again, this is extremely dangerous. H takes g4, h takes g4. Again, the knight can't move. You can't try to preserve the knight, for instance, knight h2, because rook takes h2 again. Or g3. Those are both good moves. And if you try, again, if you try to be greedy, hold on to the piece, knight d4, for instance, again, there's no escape. You got the knight covering this square, and h file is open. Okay, so a lot of hurt going on. So knight h4, and this offers the exchange of queens. Bishop takes d1, knight takes g6, knight takes g6, rook takes d1, and simply castles queen side. And you say, hey, why not take the pawn? Well, it just allows the hit f4, and that gives white a little boost. And this is getting closer to what we were talking about. You see the clear majority 4-3 against this crippled majority, and we see a little. And here black doesn't have the bishop pair either. So this is exactly what white is striving for here, and the game is starting to point in white's direction. So instead of knight takes e5 getting hit with the tempo, just simply castle here and putting pressure down this file right here with the rook. Very dangerous. Okay, so castle, and then white can just give up a pawn to ruin black's pawn structure a little bit and play the move e6. So after uh, e6 and the f takes e6, the position is pretty equal once again. Now that was a lot of stuff. It just showed you the to prove the case for knight g6, which is again like what the main idea. Shirov retreated his bishop one move too early. And the reason why I showed you the other move, knight g6, was to show you that this was a critical waste of time. And the bishop, it's just a free tempo for white here. And this loss of tempo by Shirov allows Radjabov to threaten to move bishop to g5. Let's see how he does it. So knight b3. Bishop g5 is on the table. This move also stops black's desired c5. So also, if knight g6, then, which would be a normal move for black, if knight g6, then disappointingly bishop g5 will cause black to have to resign. So we can see that move bishop e6 causes some immediate problems. For instance, b6 trying to get in c5, same thing. Bishop g5 comes, queen g6, and bishop takes e7, bishop takes e7, knight takes e5, hitting the queen on g6 and the pawn on c6. If queenside castling, knight c5 is a good move. So Shirov sees all these difficulties and he just gives up the bishop. Plays bishop takes b3. Okay, now I want you to think of the time element. Shirov played bishop g4 first, right? Pinning the knight. Then he said, nope, bishop is better placed on e6. And then he captured, so that's 3 moves with the bishop. So what's the result of that? The result is a half open a file for white, which he gets after playing a takes b3. And Shirov has no kingside attack, which was the purpose of doing all of that with bishop g4 and h5. Okay, so Shirov captures the piece on b3, so he can get in his move c5, which slows up the d4 advance. So, and what Radjabov wants to do is, since the queen is on f6, the knight is blocking the dark squared bishop, is he wants to open up the position while he has this lead in development. And so the next few moves will be revolving around these ideas of black trying to consolidate, keep things closed, and white trying to jump on black while black is in the process of trying to consolidate the position. So let's do it. c5, stopping d4, right? At least slowing it up. c3, of course, these moves could have been played. Bishop g5, attacking the queen. Bishop e3, attacking the pawn. It's all good. c3 is just clear idea to play d4. So now, remember at the early stage of the game, I told you that one of the trumps that black has in compensation for his compromised pawn structure is the bishop pair. Now we see that black has no bishop pair and his pawn structure is still compromised. So we give the nod to white in this position, albeit slight. White is far from being lost here. Okay, so after c3, knight c6. So Shirov has achieved his plan and stopping d4. He has a queen on f6, pawn on e5, pawn on c5, knight on c6, all with the eye on the d4 square. And now he is ready to consolidate his position, perhaps even castle on the next move. So this is a critical position. So what does Radjabov play? He sacrifices the pawn. He plays b4, opening up lines. Right? He has a lead in development. Remember that. So he opens lines. That is the only way your leading development will be of use. You have to have open lines for the pieces. So b4, c takes b4, d4, opening lines, mobility. E takes d4. E takes d4. So Shirov is forced to address this situation. If he tries to castle here, we have a problem at the 37th Olympiad because bishop g5 would be coming. And always, look into the position a little bit further when you see pieces in the same diagonal or same file with each other. Always keep an eye on that. A lot of tactics come about in those situations. So Shirov plays e takes d4. Okay, so now what do we do here? Again, what is the major theme then? It's exploiting the lead in development, opening lines, right? Keyword opening lines. So does Radjabov simply play c takes d4? Of course not. He continues hitting, plays bishop g5. So this move is very important. It gains more time. It attacks the queen and prevents black from castling on the queen side. What does that mean? That means now he can't go queen side and to castle on the king side. He must get this bishop out. But first he must defend the queen. So queen d6. And only now does Radjabov play c takes d4. Now you might say, hey, he's closing back up the position. Remember, you never lose your advantage. You trade the advantage for another one. So yes, he now has closed up this d file, but now he has this mobile pawn center, which he can play d5, e5, and gain more time and space and knock the black pieces out of the center. Okay, so now the next part of the plan is to push black's pieces into awkward positions. Bishop e7. What else is Shirov going to do? He wants to develop. He's trying to get his pieces out into safety. d5. Just like I said, attack. He's just keeping Shirov constantly occupied. Right? He's keeping him constantly occupied here. Shirov plays knight e5. Now you say, hey, why not bishop takes g5? I want to trade some pieces. Well, if bishop takes g5, then d takes c6. Bishop e7, and then c takes b7. And we can give white the game there. So, knight e5 has to be played. And now, Radjabov plays a good move. He avoids the trade of pieces and plays bishop f4. And you have a little x-ray tactic here. Okay, so f6 is played. Now note knight f3 check could have been played also. and he would still had to move the queen. So Shirov played f6. Notice the weakening around the light squares. Okay, so now white is much better. Black has a bad bishop, which is the bishop on e7. He's weak on the light squares, and he has a bunch of weak pawns. So that's enough for white to get to work on. Notice the weakness on the f5 square. I would love to have my knight here and here on e6 also. So there's a lot of things for white to target in this position. Okay, so after f6, knight d4. And the knight is going right to e6. That should be pretty clear. King f7. So Shirov decides that his king will be safer near the center due to the weaknesses on both of the flanks. Queen b3. Now notice knight e6 could have been occupied right away. Still a nice advantage. But queen b3. He puts pressure on the position. He puts his queen in opposition with the enemy king on f7 here. It's always good to do stuff like that because this queen might go somewhere eventually, and then next thing you know, this will be a real inconvenience move for black. Okay, so that move queen b3 is pretty good. He x-rays the king on f7, attacks the b pawn, and he also prevents. I didn't mention this. He also prevents any movement of the c pawn. Say, for instance, c5 or c6, because the discovered attacks. Okay, so now with all those problems, Shirov plays g6. Why? Because he wants to move his king off the diagonal. Now Shirov plays rook a d1. He has a huge advantage, and he just brings the other rook to the center. And is now fully developed. Now, with that said, bishop takes e5 was possible here also. And after f takes e5, notice not queen takes e5 because of the pawn advance and discovery check. So after f takes e5, knight e6. And rook ac8. Then simply just rook e3 with the idea of playing rook to f3 check. It's just devastating in the position. What else? Instead of bishop takes e5, rook e3 could have been played with the same idea. So rook a d1 is good also. King g7, again getting off that diagonal. Knight e6 could be played right here. I don't know why Radjabov kept waiting on it. It's like he kept setting up things, you know. Bishop h2. Now, why bishop h2? Again, he could have just played knight e6, still had a big advantage. Bishop to h2 is setting up the move f4 to kick the knight out and basically just mobilize this whole center. Queen b6. Of course, Shirov is a strong grandmaster, former world championship candidate. He knows what's getting ready to happen. So he comes to b6, and he kind of tries to, oppose his opponent's king. You see, maybe hinder f4 a little bit. So king h1. Which is overly cautious. He could have just played knight e6, which is probably just winning on the spot. But anyway, king h1. And what this move does, since it's a little bit slow, it allows Shirov to linger around longer than he should have had. And my argument is that he's fully developed, so now it's just time to attack. So, king h1 is a little bit too much display of caution right here. So for instance, if knight e6, check, king h6, the game could have went bishop f4, Say G5, Queen G3. Idea is real simple. If takes, then there'll be a mate here. That's winning. And then say Rook AG8. Then just Bishop takes E5. F takes E5. Queen takes, picking up another pawn. Queen D6. And no, we're not trading queens. So that's like a simple way to win the game. Instead of King H6, let's say he went to H7. Same kind of ideas. Just occupying open ranks and files. And there's just too much pressure in the position. Again, the overworked pieces. Why is Rook takes C7 possible? Because this Rook cannot capture because the Queen on F8 will be captured. So King G8, Queen takes, and we just see total collapsing of the position. So there's just two sample lines to show you that King H1 was not necessary. Shirov plays A5, F4, attacking the knight, A4, attacking the queen. The queen is more valuable, so the queen gives way. C2, B3, Queen to E2, Knight D7, and Radjabov has realized this plan of a mobile pawn center, and that's a dangerous pawn center. Now the center is fully mobilized, and that was his plan, and he is to be commended for sticking with that plan, even though he had other ideas that may have been superior. So it's what works for him. He saw advantage that way, and he stuck with it. So there's E5. F5. Why F5? Shirov is in trouble here, and he just wants to keep the position closed. Bishop G1. Again, there's an old theme. Putting your pieces in opposition with the opponent's valuable pieces. Queen A5. Queen A5. He has to get out the way. Again, Knight E6 is screaming to be played. Radjabov doesn't want to play it for some reason. So instead, he does Queen C4. And he probably seen several ways to win. So he probably was choosing what he saw was clear. Shirov looks for counter chances with Bishop H4 attacking the Rook on E1. Rook E3. Rook AC8. And again, I don't know why Knight E6 is being avoided. I just want to show you what it looks like, because Knight E6 that is the move. So don't think, if you're saying why not Knight E6, don't worry. You're not wrong. You're right. Knight E6 is the most obvious move screaming on the position. You know, there's like a scripture in the Bible. I forgot who's talking, but one of the guys, I think, says to the Apostle Paul, he says, "Much learning has made thee mad," and it's kind of like saying, basically, sometimes these grandmasters know so much that they just overlook like real obvious stuff. You know, mad. You know, I mean, crazy, not like angry mad, but mad as in a madman. You know, crazy person. Like they know so much that sometimes they overthink. You know, obvious stuff that's right in front of them. And like right here, you know, just moves like Knight E6, just scream out. But Rook C3, it's hard to argue with that. Just putting more pressure on the C file. And he's just really, this is like what you call putting the screws in. I mean, he's really just kind of torturing Shirov here at this point. Rook HE8. And finally, Knight E6 check. And this is what you call a positional dominance, my friend. And this shows you how strong Radjabov was at the time. I mean, he's since declined a little bit. Like he doesn't seem like he's in the same form as he was back around this time. Excuse me, 06 and 07 and 08. He's just totally dominating this position. And notice that all of black's pieces are inferior to their counterparts. So king h6 and knight takes c7. He just took a pawn. Uh, so knight takes c7, bishop d8, d6, bishop takes c7. And there's a really, really nice move here that Radjabov missed. Well, I'm not gonna say he missed it. You know, he probably saw it, but just chose another way. I'm not gonna say, but this move is, as to me, would cause black to resign right in the spot. D takes c7 was played by Radjabov. The move I was talking about was queen f7. There's really no defense here. Queen f7, first of all, challenges this piece right here, this knight. Then you have the pawn on d6, attacking the bishop. There's no way to preserve both pieces. For instance, if bishop b6, then just simply queen would take on d7. If bishop b8, trying to preserve the bishop. Again, queen takes on d7. If you try to preserve the knight, then the bishop will fall on c7. So there's really no way out. However, that was not played. That's the best move. So d takes c7 was played, and now there's a discovered attack on the knight as a result. So Shirov plays rook e7, rook d6, building up for the final attack. a3 and rook g3 is played, and we see the double attack on this square. Of course, Shirov was hoping to get a queen out of the deal, and even if he got a queen, he'd probably still get checkmated. Knight f8. And once knight f8 is played, notice that right now the queen can't go here because of this rook on the back rank. But once knight f8 is played, this move blocks the action of this rook, and queen finds a home right there on g8, and is threatening checkmate after the rook gives rook exchange sacrifice. There's only one move. It's rook g7, and it's not hard to find. Radjabov finds the move queen h8, and Shirov resigned. Why did Shirov resign? If knight h7, then the rook on c8 falls. Right? It's not protected. And if rook to h7, then simply captures rook, the g rook captures on g6. And I'll show that to you real quick. There's a couple of ways here. I'm looking at it right now. Hold on. Queen takes f8 work. I'm wondering. Yeah, right. Yeah, queen takes f8, because if rook takes, then yeah, you just play that. So mate, see. Yay, got something right. Okay, so yeah, basically there's no defense after queen takes f8. Check. I was also looking at this. Yeah, rook takes here. Right? Knight takes g6. Does that work? Oh, yeah. Look. Yeah, rook takes g6. This is pretty. King takes g6. I didn't even see that. Wow, I wouldn't have saw that over the board. That's pretty cool. It's like it's, I forgot what you call that kind of mate. You gotta look that up. That's pretty cool. Yeah, rook takes. Yeah, rook takes. Knight takes. Yeah, it's a nice tactic to remember. Remember that tactic, boys and girls. Yeah, I saw Queen F8 check, and then that. But anyway, after after Queen H8, Alexey Shirov, Mr. Fire on board, resigned. And he's still fire on board. It's just that he can't win every game. And then there's other players, out there too that just have just as much ability. So it's nice seeing them, as an amateur, seeing those guys clash and seeing, uh, what takes place. But in this game, we could point to its beginning of the downfalls. Is this move Bishop E6? It's very critical, where basically Black had to keep continuing on with this plan. Once you commit that bishop there to G4 and play H5, you gotta stay in it to win it. So we're gonna attribute the beginning of those problems to this move Bishop E6 there. So I hope you liked that video, and as usual, please support my channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. All right, talk to you later.